There are some real-life experiences that we read about that seem scarier and creepier than your best ghost story. The following stories are no exception, where they tell of children who appear out of nowhere with black eyes, no personality, and seeming almost robotic. Everyone who has encountered them has a feeling of fear and dread, and even though the children seem polite, they also have a maturity beyond their apparent years, where something about them is not normal. These children are known as the Black-Eyed Kids, or BEK for short, and their eyes are completely black, with no difference between pupil, sclera, or iris. They are commonly found near abandoned areas and sometimes knock on doors. People who encounter the Black-Eyed Kids report there is something dangerous and unnatural about them. They speak with the confidence and mannerisms of adults and attempt to talk their way into your home. The longer you talk to one of these kids, the more convincing they become, possibly due to mind control. Here are 5 of the creepiest stories about black-eyed children. Number 5. Harold's Encounter. Encounters with black-eyed kids first started being recorded in the 1950s. 16-year-old Harold was walking to his home in Virginia when he saw a boy leaning against a nearby fence. Harold was somewhat startled by the sudden appearance. He stopped to say hello to the boy, but the boy didn't reply. He turned to leave when the strange boy finally spoke to him, saying, "I want to go to your house. You're going to walk me up to your house." This is when Harold noticed that the boy had pitch black eyes. Every instinct in his body told him to run for his life, but he stood transfixed by what he was seeing. The boy, seemingly able to read his mind, told Harold not to run away and reiterated that Harold was going to take him to his house. This snapped Harold back to reality and got him running. He claimed that the child let out a scream like a bobcat, but he wasn't about to turn around to find out what happened for sure. The story of Harold continues, saying that his parents did believe him when he told them what happened. His dad went out with a gun, looking for the child they believed was the devil. The black-eyed kid was gone, and Harold's mother took him to visit the local priest to guarantee that he would be safe. Number 4. The gas station. We skip forward a little more than half a century to November 2012 for our next encounter, which involved a gas station attendant in Louisiana. Things started to feel creepy at a gas station when the power went out at 3 a.m. The attendant used his cell phone to find the generator and get it going again, but the backup lighting wasn't very effective and only worked in certain parts of the station, like the parking lot and cash area. The rest of the gas station was still pitch black. The attendant noticed some movement in the darkness and noticed 3 children were coming towards him on their bikes. The children stared at the attendant from the door. They creeped him out, but they were still just kids, but it was way too late for them to be out on their own like this. He opened up the door and asked the kids if they were okay. The girl asked him if she could use his phone, and he realised when he went to hand his cell phone over to her that her eyes were completely black. She demanded to use the real phone and pointed to the landline inside the office. The attendant was chilled to the bone at the mere thought of letting them inside. He shouted at the kids to leave, slammed the door, and locked it shut. The children would hang around for a little longer, staring at him with their pitch black eyes. After some time, they hopped on their bikes and disappeared into the night. The attendant was eager to look through the security footage of the encounter in the morning, but unfortunately the power cut had turned off the cameras, and they weren't powered by the generator. so the attendant had no evidence that his encounter with the black-eyed kids ever took place. Number 3, the parking lot. The journalist Brian Bethel of Abilene, Texas, has the distinction of being the first person to post his encounter with black-eyed kids online. His story starts back in 1996 when Bethel was sitting in his car writing out a check that he was preparing to leave with his internet service provider. Bethel was startled by the sound of someone knocking on his window of his car, and he looked up to see 2 children wearing hoodies. He felt an unexplainable jolt of fear run through his body. They were only kids, but he could tell that something was definitely wrong with them, although he couldn't tell what or why. He opened his car window just enough to talk with the kids and find out what they wanted. The oldest boy asked if they could have a ride home to their mother's house. He claimed that they were going to watch a movie but had forgotten their money. They needed a ride home so they could make it back to the theatre in time to watch the movie. Bethel was close enough to see the marquee at the theatre, so he asked the boys what movie they were going to watch. They replied that they were watching Mortal Kombat, and Brian knew that Mortal Kombat had started playing an hour ago. He also had doubts about the boys that he couldn't shake off. They were talking and acting like people who were much older than what they were. "Just let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it. We'll just go to our mother's house," the boy said. Everything that he had said sent shivers down Bethel's spine, and that was when he noticed their pitch black eyes, completely devoid of soul and substance. Bethel was terrified, and he didn't even try to hide it. "Oh, come on, mister, we won't hurt you. You'll have to let us in." "We don't have a gun," the boy said. The more the boy spoke, the more convinced Bethel was that he had to get away from them, and fast. He threw the car into reverse and sped off, watched by the boy still demanding to be let in. Bethel gave the boys one last glance and saw that they were gone. The black-eyed kids had disappeared into thin air before he even left the parking lot. Number 2, 5 a.m. encounter. An engineer on the night shift at a data center in Ohio had his own creepy encounter, which he recounted online anonymously using the handle Noetic. Noetic was enjoying a smoke break at around 5 a.m. on July the 31st, 2010, when he noticed that there were 2 teenage boys staring at him from across the street. He felt incredibly unnerved and promptly put out a cigarette and headed back inside. The intercom went off around 10 minutes later. Noetic looked at the monitor and saw that it was the 2 boys he had seen. They had come across to the building and were now staring straight at Noetic through the surveillance camera. He used a speaker on the intercom to ask them what they were after. They didn't reply and instead motioned at him to come outside to them. This time, when he pressed the speaker button, he told them to leave. They didn't, instead continuing to stare at the camera as if they were watching Noetic as he worked. It took another 10 minutes or so for Noetic to be very creeped out and decide to chase the boys away to get rid of them. As he was about to open the door, he saw the boys through the one-way glass and was terrified to see that they had pitch black eyes. He decided that he would open the door to get rid of them and would call the police to get help if he needed it. As soon as he opened the door, one of the boys said, almost as if reading his mind about the police, "That will not be necessary, sir. We simply need to use your phone. Can you let us in?" Noetic wasn't about to fall for this. He pulled his phone out and threatened to call the police if the boys didn't leave. He locked the door and returned to the monitor. There was only one boy left staring at the camera. He quickly realised that the other boys had moved to the back of the building and was staring into the camera there instead. Noetic called the police and the boys then moved into a blind spot that the camera couldn't see. He wanted for them to come back into view, but the boys simply disappeared. The police arrived at around 6 a.m, but by then the boys had gone. Number 1. The walk home. 18-year-old Carrie Holsworth was walking home to her apartment after having a night out. It was around 11 p.m. when she spotted 2 teenage boys that she'd never seen before, just standing there in her yard. She was a bit put on edge from this, so double-checked that she had a pepper spray in her purse just in case. She held on tight to her only means of defence and attempted to sneak past the boys, but failed. They both turned around simultaneously, and she immediately felt a deep primal fear that increased her grip on the pepper spray canister. As if the boys could tell what she was thinking and what she was hiding in her purse, the older one said to her, "No need for that. We just want to borrow your phone, miss." That was when she noticed that their eyes were completely pitch black, with no whites or irises at all. Her flight response kicked in and she darted for the front door, fumbling to grab her keys as she was followed by the black-eyed boys. "Please, miss, my mother won't be happy if she doesn't know where we are," the boy pleaded. Every instinct Holsworth had told her to get away from the boys. She also felt a small twang of guilt and considered helping the boys, but the feeling quickly became overwhelmed by the dread that was overcoming her. She made her way inside her apartment, slammed the door shut, and locked it immediately. She breathed a sigh of relief and headed for the kitchen, and then the knocking started. Holsworth decided to ignore the knocking. The boys knocked again, and the overwhelming feeling of dread came back with it. She decided to risk taking a peek through the peephole of the door. The boys were standing there, staring through the peephole as if they were staring right at her. Just let us in to use the phone," the boy said. "We won't hurt you. We have no weapons to hurt you with." Holsworth ordered the boys to go away and leave her alone. She ensured that everything had been locked tight and called up one of her friends to come over. The boys stayed until the friend showed up. Holsworth's friend never saw the black-eyed children herself, but she did feel the overwhelming sense of danger they left behind when she arrived. Holsworth moved away from the apartment not long after, and now always checks who is on the other side of the door before opening it.